All right, well, welcome to today's webinar, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Health Ed and Physical Education Teachers. It's going to be fantastic. And can you go to the next slide? And just a little welcome in a bunch of different languages. Next slide. All right, here we are for some introductions. Margaret Brownlee just joined the department fairly recently, and she's our new director of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and she'll be talking first. Jan.12 is our family engagement and cultural responsiveness specialist, and she'll be going second. And then Amelia Lyons has a lot of information on migrant education as well as homeless. And April Perkins is in charge of world languages and ESOL bilingual program specialist, and she definitely is a specialist. So Margaret, why don't you go ahead? Oh, you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry. Okay. We just wanted to add a few guiding principles for today in terms of honoring all voices, respecting people's different opinions, sharing the airtime and participating fully. And I also wanted to add one about asking questions. So this is the second part in this series, but please feel free to ask lots and lots of questions. So thank you, Jean, for introducing me. My name again is Margaret Brownlee. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the newest director or new director and first of its kind of the diversity, equity, and inclusion here at the Maine DOE. For those of you who are new to the term DEI, I'm just going to give a very brief introduction. I use this slide frequently when explaining DEI because I think it's pretty short, succinct, and to the point. I also added a J component, which is a trend that's becoming more and more popular. So diversity, when we think of the term, is people and perspectives and celebrating all the unique voices. And I also add not just race, but it can include sexual orientation, religion, age, and a variety of components. Equity is a little harder to explain, but I know that Jekka is going to be explaining it a little bit more in her slides as well. Equity is policy, practice, and position in ensuring that everyone has the ability to meet the same level of ability. Oftentimes there's a slide that's shown where there are three different people trying to access a ball game. Some people need more supports to see the game than others. When you think about it in terms of education, some students in our classroom need more supports than others, and that is equity, and that is the way we should be going in the classroom. Inclusion is ensuring that we all have our power, voice, and an organizational culture that includes all. I oftentimes explain this in terms of if you have a disagreement with someone, it's usually because you have a different of perspective, in ensuring that we all have a voice and we all need to be heard and include each other's opinions. And then lastly, the J component, which is justice, is equal rights and equitable opportunities. There are movements that have happened in the past few years, such as Black Lives Matter, Me Too, climate justice. I mean, the list goes on. Here in education, you will see today that we're talking about justice in terms of many different things. So again, ask lots of questions, and this is just a brief overview of DEI today. When I think of DEI in pre-K to 12 education, I think of these 10 different facets. And there's a lot on this page, but this is in my brain what I think of in terms of DEI for education. So it's culturally inclusive leadership, inclusive classrooms, decolonized curriculum, and I'll talk about that a teeny bit on the next slide. Celebrating BIPOC voices, and BIPOC is a term if you've never heard of. It stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. Anti-racist and anti-bias learning, culturally responsive pedagogy, equity audits and training, which many schools are doing now. And if you have questions, again, feel free to reach out. And then the most important, I think, is empowering youth to be leaders in a culture of respect. When it comes to incorporating DEI into health education and physical education for the curriculum and lesson plans, I added a few things here with a few online resources. The first one I think is to talk about health disparities by race because they do exist, and there's a lot of resources out there to think about it and to talk about it. Acknowledge the barriers that BIPOC students face in your classroom. And again, BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, people of color. Bring diverse voices and perspectives into the classroom. That can be books, videos, guest speakers, a variety of things. And then last but not least, incorporate multiple learning styles into the classroom. I know for me, even as an adult learner, I love to see a variety of learning. So whether that's audio, visual, social, solitary, there's lots of different ways you can reach lots of different students because we all learn differently. I added 4 brief resources such as Edutopia, the Resilient Educator, Great Schools Partnership, and the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium. So that's a little bit about me and kind of the brain that I have right now. The work that I'm doing in the classroom, in the DOE, will involve working internally with leaders and then externally with schools in the next couple of months. All right, I'm going to pass the.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Margaret. I think before I meant to have folks introduce themselves and I forgot. So I'm going to go back and have folks introduce themselves before. I think Amelia, you're up next, right? So I'll just call on you and just say your name and what school and what grade you teach. So Kathy Z, you're up. I see you're okay. Good.
You want me to stop screen share?
Oh yeah, that would be good. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay.
There we go.
There we go.
Try again. Thanks.
I was eating my snack, sorry. My name is Kathy Zema, and I teach middle school health in Falmouth. And I'm so happy to be a part of this and come to this training because I'm on the part of the equity team in my district and learning a lot, but I've really been interested in the health education piece of it and how that fits into all of this. So I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Kathy. And this, of course, this PowerPoint will be shared. So let's see, Brian, you just came in, but I'll have you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Brian Sullivan. Can you hear me? Is my mic on?
Yeah.
All right. And I'm an elementary phys ed teacher at Hollis Elementary this year. Working 3 days a week. I was 5 days at a different school, but I dropped down to 3, kind of semi-retired, I guess.
Oh, good for you.
I'm in the hallway. There's Rex. It's kind of noisy with the rack. I'm ready to put this back on if they show up, but that's why I'm a little late. I was trying to clean up my stuff.
No problem. Thanks, Brian.
You're welcome.
Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen Doe. I teach at Falmouth Elementary School, K2, and Kathy's my son's health teacher.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Glad you're here.
Always a small world.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jen. Kim?
Oh, sorry, my phone goes off as I unmute. I teach at Paris Elementary School in the Oxford Hills School District, pre-K through 6 physical education.
Great. Thank you. And Maddie?
My name is Maddie. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I work at Maine Family Planning as a prevention coordinator. So we help folks in the state teach sexual health, puberty, those topics, and we write curriculum and stuff like that and have a bunch of free resources on our website if anyone's looking. And we also have folks from the D presenting at our annual conference in April. So we're really excited to have Decca and other folks joining us for that this year.
All right. Thanks, Maddie. All right. Now we can go back. Now, Margaret, will you be able to stay on or I can share? Okay, great. So go ahead and share. And then Amelia, you're up. Thanks so much. Again,
Did
I
we hear from
apologize.
everybody?
Yeah, I think so. Because the rest of you will, anyway. So Amelia, you can just talk a little bit about yourself. And then
Okay. Thank you so much, Jean. Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Amelia Lyons. I work with the Maine DOE with the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act and with the Migrant Education Program. If you don't mind, would you just put up somewhere between 1 and 5, oh, over here, 5, for how familiar you are with McKinney-Vento Homeless Education? These are students who are eligible as homeless with their schools. See some
0.
ones. I see a 4, a 0. Nice. I love when we have zeros and ones. 1, great. Okay, good. So lots to learn. I love it. Stop me at any point, ask any questions. Happy to go into some detail here. Oh, I can't. Can you go to the next slide, please? So here's some basic info on students who are eligible for McKinney-Vento in the state of Maine in the 1920 school year. You'll see the vast majority of students fall under the doubled up category. That's that big blue section. That's 61% of our students. Doubled up means that you're staying with another family because of a loss of housing or an economic hardship. So this could be couch surfing. This could look like I got evicted, so I moved in with my sister and her family while we're trying to find another place, right? So even though we have a roof over our heads, we still would qualify as homeless under this program. Doubled up is not included in other federal agencies' definitions of homeless. So there's some confusion when you're working with housing providers and HUD and things like that. But for education, it is included. So it doesn't matter really the circumstances that led to it. It's more about, is the child currently doubled up with someone else? So it could be that, you know, my family, that I came out and my family kicked me out and I went to live with my friend. I would then qualify as homeless because that's a temporary living situation due to a loss of housing because that house is no longer available to me. Or it could be the other way, that I ran away, that I came out and home was so dysfunctional and I didn't want to be there anymore that I ran away and lived with a friend. That could also qualify. So those are some of the very common things that we see and that we hear about in our state and country, you know, across the country for students who qualify in this program. So doubled up is the largest category. The next largest is shelters and transitional housing. So this is any kind of temporary housing program, domestic violence shelters, youth shelters, family shelters, anything like that could qualify a student as homeless. And then we also have hotels and motels. So some families, I just heard of a family where their house burned down and they're currently staying in a hotel in the meantime. They would qualify as homeless for this program. And then the smallest little sliver there is unsheltered. That is that's more what people usually think when they think about homeless. So living in your car, living in a park, living at a bus station or any abandoned building or any place that's not fit for human habitation is what the law calls it. And fortunately in Maine, our numbers are pretty low there for students who are living in those kinds of situations. Next slide, please. So this is from before COVID. You can see 2018 numbers. Maine is looking, we identify around 2,000 students a year who qualify as homeless statewide, and that's about 1% of our student population. However, nationally, we see that number is more like 3% of students who are identified as experiencing homelessness. And with our area child poverty rates, with our lack of affordable housing, with COVID on top of everything else, we would expect that number to be much, much higher. Even before COVID, this number was more estimated at 5% for Maine. So we have a lot of work to do to make our schools safe places where families and students can feel comfortable disclosing that they're experiencing housing instability. Oh, next slide, please. I keep trying to do it myself. And then this is some really great data from MIAS, and thank you, Jean, for your work on all of that stuff. Schoolhouse Connection compiled some of this data from 27 states, including Maine, and came out to say that for every 18.5 high school students, one has experienced homelessness. So if we're looking at one classroom, that's probably at least one student in each classroom who has experienced homelessness. And that sometimes, to word it that way, makes more sense for me than looking at percentages and numbers in a more abstract way. Next slide, please. And then there's a lot of disproportionality in this population. So it's really important to look at the data and use it to think about how we can best serve and support students. So by race, Black high school students, Hispanic and American Indian or Alaska Native students are more likely to experience homelessness compared to white students. And then LGBTQ is 2.2 times more likely. But then when you get to the T part, transgender, it's actually 9.22 times more likely. So this is also really, really important in the work that you all do and the intersection of all of these subjects in terms of how we support students and how we ensure that they're connected to resources that they are entitled to. McKinney-Vento is a federal law that students are entitled to if they qualify. Next slide, please. So this has just another way to look at potential eligibility situations. I think we've covered everything here.
Yeah, this, like I said, this slide, they'll be getting these slides, so that's
Okay.
good.
Great. Thank you, Jean. Next slide, please. And so we also included some basic like flyer kind of information to help families to know their rights and for students to know their rights. So just encouraging families to feel comfortable sharing if they're experiencing some kind of housing instability and to recognize what are their rights under McKinney-Vento. And the biggest one is that students who are in temporary housing have the right to stay in the same school even if they're temporarily living out of district. And that staying in that same school would also be receiving transportation to school. So if I live in Falmouth and domestic violence situation happens and I have to go live in Scarborough, but I want my kids to stay in school where they know everybody, they have their teachers, they've been since they were in kindergarten, I would qualify under McKinney-Vento, my children would, and they would be able to continue going to Falmouth every day, receiving transportation to and from school, even though we're temporarily living in Scarborough. Does that make sense? That's kind of the gist of the whole thing. Yes. The other piece of it is maybe there was a domestic violence situation in Falmouth, and now we really want to move to Scarborough and we want to have a fresh start. So we have an option where with the school, we would talk about a best interest determination, and we could decide, you know what, I want a fresh start. I want my kids to enroll in Scarborough, and this is going to be what's best and safest for them. Then as McKinney-Vento students, they would have the right to do that as well. And they would not need any of the normally required documentation for enrollment. So we don't need proof of residency. We don't need birth certificates. We don't need proof of age or even guardianship stuff. Students can automatically enroll without having those documents. Also, vaccination records, they would need to eventually, but it could not deter enrollment at that time. Next slide, please. This is just another way of saying it and helping families to know, are you staying in temporary housing? Do you want your children to stay at their current school? That kind of sums up McKinney-Vento in a nutshell. Next slide, please. And so this is our McKinney-Vento screener. All schools are encouraged to use this in their enrollment and back to school paperwork. I'm hoping it may be familiar for some people that work in schools or have enrolled their own children in schools in Maine. Lately in conversations, folks have not been familiar with this, but it basically starts out with, if you check off that I live in my own home with my immediate family, then you don't have to complete the rest of the form. But if you don't check off that option, it gives you some other options and would lead to a conversation to see if this family may be eligible for McKinney-Vento. And so in every school district, you have a McKinney-Vento liaison. Can you give me a thumbs up if you know who your McKinney-Vento liaison is in your school district? Your homeless education liaison, or a thumbs down if you do not. A down. Oh, so many downs. Okay. Well, lucky for you, I have a link where you can search it by district right here. So you can find out who that person is. So if you have any family that you think, this family is staying in I know this family is currently staying with their friend. Let me double check with this person in my district with the liaison to make sure that this student is being flagged as homeless and is receiving additional supports.
You have just another few minutes there, Amelia. So
okay, all right, I'll wrap it up. Margaret, next slide, please. So just some thoughts on homelessness, some potential signs that you might see that could indicate that a family is going through something. Thinking about hygiene, wearing the same clothing repeatedly, unmet needs, medical or dental, things like that. Next slide, please. And then this has some tips on trauma-informed ways to have these conversations with folks. The biggest one I want to bring attention to is really that not everyone will identify with the word homeless. So talking about families in transition, families in between places, families in temporary housing are all ways that might bridge that conversation a little bit easier. Next slide, please. And then the biggest thing is if you have any thoughts that you have students who may qualify, connect to your liaison. There is the link here as well as in the chat. Next slide, please. The only other thing I want to talk about real quick is also the migrant education program. This is supplemental educational support for students who qualify. To qualify for the program, students have to have moved across school district lines and have someone in their house who has worked in agriculture or fishing. So in Maine, we see people who harvest apples, blueberries, fish processing, seafood processing, potatoes. Those are some of the bigger crops. Next slide, please. The services they can receive are provided by Mano & Mano, our subcontractor. And what they do is provide a lot of referral services and tutoring and virtual tutoring and other support for the students. Next slide, please. And similar to our McKinney-Vento screener, this is our migrant education screener that just asks if someone in your home has worked in any of these industries. If yes, we will follow up and call them to see if they qualify and if they can receive some services. Does anyone know if you have had McKinney-Vento students, migrant students in your schools before? A yes or a no?
Yeah.
No. Oh, a yes. Oxford Hills. I heard somebody from Oxford Hills. You've had migrant students. Okay. All right. I think that's all that I had. Is that? Yes. Okay. Are there any questions at this point? Thank you for letting me go on and on here.
No, thank you so much, Amelia. It's just, there's so much information. That was very, very helpful. You can always put questions in the chat and then we can come back to those if we need to. All right, Decca, you're up next.
All right. Hey, everyone. I am Decca Delac. I am the Family Engagement and Cultural Responsiveness Specialist for the DOE. I put this slide which says understanding cultural responsiveness before, during, and after COVID. And when we're talking about COVID-19, I don't know if you guys are aware of, in Maine was the biggest with racial disparities when it comes to COVID. The Black and Brown people made up to 1.4% of the state population in Maine, but we make up to 23.6% of its COVID cases.
Wow.
And that was the highest in the whole nation.
Wow.
So that's when, COVID hit us here in Maine. And we really talked about how that disrupted kids' education because all of their family members were having COVID. So therefore they were losing school time because of, can somebody mute? Yeah. They were losing all of these times. But before that, still we had those achievement gaps when it comes to, Black and Brown students. We had all of those, things that are kind of disparities when it comes to not only education, but also healthcare, housing, as Amelia talked about, in so many different levels of the systems that we have in this in the country. And that is not something that we can say it pertains to teachers, but it's just a systemic thing that has been there for a very long time. So that is why I put it before, during, and after. We're gonna see that even after we get out of COVID, some kind of a despair. Move
Decca,
faster because okay. I'm gonna turn off my oh Lord. Can you hear me now? I'm gonna turn off my camera. Let me turn off my camera so that my internet has been bad. Okay, so next slide, please.
Okay, sounds like,
Can you hear me now?
yes,
Yes?
yes.
Oh Lord. I got this. Okay. We were doing just fine.
It's okay, Decca, don't worry.
Okay, I see people moving, so that's good. A little bit. So cultural, just wave if you cannot hear me. Cultural responsive schools make relationships priority. So why is that? Why do we need to make relationships? And those are really important things. Who do we know that provided services for the children that we serve? Who are those community-based organizations that are in our districts, in our cities? What kind of food pantries these kids really access? And who do they get their, let's say, maybe clothing, who help them with that? So we need to really build those relationships in order for us to have those resources at hand when child is in need. And for example, for phys ed teachers, you might see a student who do not have shoes, proper shoes to do their activities when they are doing the phys ed classes. So who do you have? What kind of a relationship are you building with community-based organizations so that you can grab those needed shoes and things in that sort? Another thing as an educator, and I'm going to put myself as an educator because I organize, I teach community members for so many different things. We have that responsibility to care about how we teach as much as what we are teaching, right? So how are we really connecting with those children that we know are not usually connected when it comes to education, and in this case, the phys ed piece. How are we connecting? How are we teaching? Are we picking them when they just put their hands up and say, I want to answer that question? Do we just give them a space and say, yes, you can say something, even though they might not speak the language? I know April will talk about the ELL and the access to that. Are we saying, oh, we don't want to really embarrass this child because they don't speak the language well? We have to really put them in the spot and say yes, and encourage them really to have that connection with us as educators. Usually kids do not care what they know until they know that you care. And when you really giving them the space to shine and to talk and to be part of the community that you have, then they will really know that you really care about it. And I talk about this a lot because my daughter, who is 21 years old now, talks about how the best teacher that she ever had was her 5th grade teacher. Nobody can change that. And she been in school for as long as she lived, but that is her person. Mrs. Baker is her person. Nobody can take that away from her because she was the only Black kid in the class, and she was getting all the attention that she needed from her teacher and making sure that she always sees her. So next slide. All right, so importance of cultural competency. What is cultural competency, right? None of us will reach that cultural competency. It does not matter who we are. We can be culturally responsive, culturally this. There's always some new nuances that are coming in front of us. So all we can do is learn and teach as much as we can. So what does that look like? That look like improving the quality of service that we're giving to any space. Again, I'm talking about whether it is healthcare, whether it is education, whether it is, whatever it is, how we are giving that quality of service. And improving community involvement. I talked about this on the previous slide. How are we connecting to these communities? How are we connecting to the families of our children that we teach, right? Does our school district have community night? Are we having dinners with the families that are, I know right now we can't do that because of COVID, but how is that connection? Do you already build that connection, right? And what changes or false beliefs do we have? What assumptions do we have? And stereotypes, right? We talked about a little bit, if a child is ELL English learner, we should not say he or she does not speak English, therefore, I don't want to put her on the spot and embarrass her. No, our job is really to have that communication and connection in order for these children to learn more and, keep that stereotypes or whatever we have behind. And help us not make harmful decisions, right? And how can we do that? We are humans. We're always making mistakes. I make mistakes. So we're going to be really making mistakes, and we should be learning from those mistakes. Last time we checked, we were in a school district, and excuse me, one of my colleagues was talking about how she had in the classroom that she was participating, few kids of color, and the teacher will not pick them up when they put their hand up, right? So how are we really making harmful decisions while we're doing that? Because that child is going to feel like, I'm not good enough. My teacher is not picking on me. So that is really a harmful thing to that kid, right? So let's just also not do that when we are in our classrooms, and making sure we are really being equitable when it comes to picking on different kids and asking questions. So another important factor is that people from different backgrounds and cultures, we need to get to know them better, right? I do that always. I try to learn different languages and making sure that I'm connecting with people. So let's just try that, and making sure that you are talking to different people in different backgrounds. I always get people calling me and asking me, where can I get a Mandarin translator, right? Where can I get a Portuguese translator? And I am open to that. And I always tell people, reach out to me if you need one. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So culturally aware. Sometimes we have, as humans, our own biases. I do have ones. We all have. If we don't have biases, we're not humans. So let's check our biases before we do anything. Excuse me for 1 minute.
Hopefully you got some water there, Decca.
Becca,
Yes, yes, I do. So we have to check our own biases. Something went on the other side of my throat. It does that sometimes.
Becca,
Yeah,
I can tell this story for you because I know your
thank
bias
you.
story.
Thank
mind?
you. Yes,
Correct.
please go for it.
Correct me if I'm wrong here at all, but I love this story and I tell it to people all the time. Decca used to have this idea based on, however we're influenced by our upbringing and everything. She had this idea that white men with tattoos were scary people to be afraid of, and she carried that with her for a long time. And then in one of her jobs, she met a coworker who was wonderful and amazing, and she knew him as a coworker, and then one day found out about he was completely tatted underneath his clothes, right? And she was like, wait a second, how could this person who I know to be so kind and so strong and so genuine also have this part to him that I had really prejudged if she had known that, right? And so that was one of the examples of looking at what are our biases, how are they impacting the way we see the world, and how can we grow and learn from them. Is that right?
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And I love him so much. I couldn't believe, my biases and how that was really so wrong. And in this next paragraph in the slide, it also tells you, to connect with everybody. You will find out you have more in common than differences, right? So we have to put our beliefs on the side when we are really connecting with people. And it happens a lot, and I've seen it in the school districts. Some teachers do not even talk to immigrant parents. They just like wave them away or whatever. I know we don't all do that. There are amazing people we have in our districts, a lot, but it happens. So next slide, please.
Yeah, and sorry, Decca,
Yeah,
I don't mean to rush you, but just another few minutes. And then April will be up.
And I was going fast too.
No, that's good, Decca, sorry.
So the other thing is that the iceberg, and I'm sure all of you saw it. So when you look at the iceberg or look at me as a person, you will see my hijab, you will see my color, and there is so much underneath that, right? I do more than the average person sometimes. And that is, most of our kids are like that. You will see a fifth grader in classroom that speaks 6 languages, right? But all we see is this young person, this small human. That's all we see, but so much more underneath. So just get to know that, get to understand more of that, and then you will get to the bottom of the iceberg. Next slide, please. And this, I like this because it comes from the social emotional piece and the behavioral that we have as humans. So how can we self-manage in this ability to navigate and shift things around? So I put this because I like what I see. Some kids are on their books, some kids are on the blackboard or the whiteboard in this case, and just being, being as a teacher, being present on all the students. I know we are only one person, but how can you have that when it comes to, providing a healthy way of make decisions and reach goals that we all have that will benefit for everybody and every student in the classroom. So next slide, do we have more? Yeah.
Oh, I like this slide.
Yeah, this is the one that Margaret was talking about earlier. And the equality versus the equity piece, if you take a look at it, we say, okay, equality. Everybody has one stool to stand on, but it's still that short person is not able to see the game. Then we said, okay, let's be equitable and just give the shorter person more stools to stand on. But what if we just break all of that fence? Isn't that justice? So that everybody can see, whether we are in wheelchair, whether we are a baby, small person, or a grown person, so that we can all see that. So this is really something that was added to the justice piece, which is really awesome, and I like it a lot. Next slide, please. I like this, the courageous conversation. Does anybody heard of Glenn Singleton? So Glenn Singleton has the 4 agreement of courageous conversations. And these are some of them that I just took it out, but the 4 agreements, if you want to hear those, are, let me see if I have it somewhere in here. Yes, stay engaged, experience discomfort, speak your truth, expect and accept, non-disclosure, non-closure. So that was really fascinating to me when I heard first, and I was like, what does that even mean when it comes to education, right? What does this exactly mean? So I took a look at what we had in our slides and said, okay, how can we really reach out to these students about this exact 4 agreements that Glenn Singleton had? So stayed engaged means remain normally and emotionally, morally and emotionally, intellectually, and socially involved in dialogues, in all dialogues. Just stay on that. And once we stay on those dialogues, the outcomes are always really come into a space that we can all agree on what we are really talking about and how we are really engaging in one another. And be passionate. And the connection educators bring to the classroom is really transform equity. I believe in that because I believe in teachers. And where I'm from, we were told teachers are your second parent. Your mom and dad are first. Your teacher is your second parent. So we believe what you bring into the classroom really transform things in a way that is unimaginable when it comes to especially kids who are coming from spaces that in a refugee camps and things in that sort, who never had the opportunity to go to schools. And when we're talking about the practice, the passion and the action taken, we're making sure students reach their full potential. That is you. That's the teacher who's doing that. It's all about you who's doing that. And what a beautiful outcome when that happens, and when that happens in equitable way. And the persistence piece is the dedication to address equity. I know that some school districts in Maine put in their budgets about equity to uplift equity and hire more teachers of diverse backgrounds. So those are really, really things that we can achieve if we really look into the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece that Margaret talked about earlier when she opened the PowerPoints for us on this presentation. Is that all I have? I cannot see anything.
So, yeah, I believe so. And then April.
Okay, I hope I didn't take a lot of time, Jean. I'm sorry.
No. That's fine. I just love your passion. I really do. So anyway, it's always fun to listen to you. So April, you'll be up next. So next slide. There we go.
Thank you. And you can skip right ahead to the next one. So it would be truly impossible for me to give you a full picture of what it means to ensure equity for students who are English learners. So what I'm going to present to you today is just some very superficial info, and then a few resources for you to go and engage in some deeper learning for yourselves. So I know that everybody here today has a different level of experience with students who are learning English. Maybe some of you have never had a student, and some of you have many students in your classrooms like this. So I just wanted to set a baseline and make sure we all are on the same page with what a student who is an English learner is. So we define a student who is an English learner as a student who has a primary or home language other than English and who is not yet proficient in English. And so I pulled a couple of little data snapshots from you, for you from the English Learner Data Dashboard, which you can find on the main DOE website if you're interested in seeing more. But that first one in the top corner shows you the bars on the left side are the English learner population, and the blue bars on the right side are the overall student population. So you can see that the overall student population is decreasing. And in fact, this is a trend that has been going on for many years. I just pulled the last few years for you to look at. And then the English learner population is increasing with a little bit of a dip in 2020, but now is on a very steady rise. And I expect that our numbers for 2022 are going to be higher still. So all that to say that if you haven't yet had an English learner in your classroom, chances are very high that you will have one. And so having some preparation and understanding about what their needs are and what you can do to support them is really very proactive and wise. When we think about students who are English learners, sometimes we think about their needs as the primary thing, but I really want to bring the conversation back to the amazing things that they bring with them as assets. So what do they bring? Of course, we understand they bring linguistic and cultural expertise with them. As Decca said, sometimes these students speak 4, 5, 6 languages. And so we look at them and say, well, you don't speak English. And what a strange way to regard that student that is, because they just have an incredible wealth of knowledge about languages. And then the cultural expertise as well. We say, well, you don't understand or you don't know about this culture. That may be true, but they may have very deep knowledge of their home culture or cultures that you can leverage as a teacher and help them to learn through. They also bring with them prior educational experiences and knowledge. And so sometimes we think of them as a blank slate, that maybe they haven't attended school or they've had limited schooling. And we think, oh, there's so much that we need to remediate and make up for. But even if they weren't attending school, they've had life experiences that have made them very rich in their own way. And it's our duty as educators to find out what those experiences are and to make use of them for the students' benefit. And oftentimes, because of the situations that students who are English learners are coming from, they've experienced a great deal of adversity and hardship in their lives many times. And so they come with amazing capacity for flexibility and resilience. And those are also things that can be leveraged for the benefit of their education. They also have social and interpersonal skills that may be different from other students who are not English learners, because they have needed to cope with an environment where they're not proficient in the language that's spoken by everyone around them. So they develop strategies and skills for navigating that. And they really do add so much richness to your classroom as a health or physical education teacher, because they bring oftentimes very different perspectives from other students, different background knowledge and experiences that for other students to become aware of those things is really enriching. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, really quickly, the other data point that I have there, I failed to mention, this is the breakdown of the top languages that are spoken by our students who are English learners, just in case you're curious to see what the overall picture of the state looks like. And so far, our top 2 languages after English are Somali and Arabic. But Portuguese has been very steadily gaining, and I expect that next year it may find itself in the top few languages. Okay, next please. So again, some of us know this already, but just in case you're not aware, when a student is an English learner at school, they have certain rights that they're entitled to help them meaningfully access their education. And what that basically means is that they get direct support from a teacher who is qualified in ESOL. And that direct support could look like pull-out services, push-in services, small group or individual. There are really many different methods for delivering English language acquisition support, including co-teaching. And the intention of those supports is to help them develop their proficiency in English and also develop academic language. So it's not just conversational social language, although that is very important. What the ESOL services are ultimately aiming to do is to ensure that students are equipped with advanced academic language to help them be successful in all of their academic pursuits and beyond. And then there is an expectation that those supports would enable them to acquire their grade level content. Sometimes that is a little hard for folks to understand because, like we talked about before, a student may be coming with limited or interrupted educational experiences prior to reaching your school. Sometimes educators have an impulse to put a student in a lower grade than their age would normally dictate. But a student has a civil right to be in the grade level of their same aged peers and to work on the same content as those same aged peers. So that does sometimes require some pretty innovative approaches to make sure that students are building the background knowledge that they need and also working at the same time on their grade level content. Very importantly, and I really want to highlight this for the educators here with us today, that another key right that students who are English learners have is to receive support within all of their content area classes to acquire the content by receiving modifications and strategies and supports for language learning alongside the content. And sometimes people think of that as the responsibility of the ESOL teacher. Well, the ESOL teacher should modify this test for me, or should tell me how to make this activity accessible to the student. And ESOL teachers are very good at that and very willing to help with that. But ultimately, it is the responsibility of the content area teacher to make sure that the content is accessible to the student while with you in your classroom. And so working with the ESOL teacher is a great way to build up your own strength and skills in doing that. And it really does require a great deal of collaboration, and scheduling, of course, is a very difficult thing sometimes to find that collaborative time, but even emailing, phone calls, passing each other in the hallway, whenever you're able to find time to talk with each other and talk about what the student's needs are, what the student is learning, that collaboration is so essential. And then finally, ensuring a safe and welcoming classroom environment. That's certainly something that a content area teacher can and really should do for all students. But that safe and welcoming environment for a student who's an English learner has a lot to do with language. And I think we'll talk about that on the next slide. Okay, so like we said, there's so much depth to what it means to support an English learner. So I can't possibly teach all of that to you today. But I just thought I'd share a few really small and simple steps that you can take that move in that direction. And if you were with us last time, I think we might have touched on a couple of these. So one thing that I always recommend is that as you're giving instructions, whether you're a health teacher or phys ed teacher, whatever activity it is students are going to be engaging in, that you always provide instructions in multiple ways. So you tell them orally, this is what you're going to be doing. You can tell them in writing, if at all possible. And the most important, I think, is by example. So if you are teaching how to play soccer, then you're going to show them what that means, whether it's through a video, whether it's through demonstration yourself, whether it's through watching other classmates engage in the game. That teaching by example is extremely important for a student who's acquiring language. Also, very importantly, is making sure that students have an opportunity to benefit from the linguistic skills that they bring. So as much as it's possible to do so, having signage in your classroom that reflects multiple languages that are spoken in your classroom. So for example, if you have a poster about avoiding smoking, that you could have a poster in French alongside your poster in English, and those materials are usually readily available. And then carefully planning which students you might see with which students, thinking about the skills and dispositions that they bring. If you have a student who you know is going to be happy to support a student who's learning English and kind of buddy with them, that could be a really helpful thing as well. And then if you happen to have students, well, actually, I'll say it this way. If you can encourage them to use the resources that they have in their first or primary language by showing them some technology tools that allow for translation, providing alternate texts in their language if possible, encouraging them to translate, make lists that are translated, to write their notes in whatever language would be most useful for them. Those kinds of things can be really supportive and helpful. If you are able to give students some indication of what's coming the next day, or even farther in advance than that, if you're able to, so that they know what to anticipate and can take those plans and materials home, look at them, and translate as needed, so that they're coming to class prepared with an idea of what's going to happen, and with a sense of what vocabulary words are going to be really essential for them to meaningfully engage with the unit. So that's a skill that takes time to develop, but if you can kind of look at your materials and think about which words are the absolute essential that students need to have to be able to engage with this, provide those words to them in advance. I think that's one of the most important things you can do. And then we talked about that very essential collaboration between the content area teacher and the ESOL teacher. I think ESOL teachers are generally stretched very thin, to be honest, and there's a lot of focus on collaboration between ESOL teachers and math and ELA teachers or science teachers, less emphasis on collaboration between ESOL teachers and health and physical education teachers. But from my point of view, that's not warranted. All aspects of a student's education are equally important. And it's important to emphasize here that a student has a civil right to meaningfully access all aspects of their academic programming, or their school programming, curricular, extracurricular. So it is the school's responsibility to make sure that the student can access the content in their health and physical education classes as well. All right. Do I have another slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So as I said in the beginning, there's just far too much to share with you in the span of 10 or 15 minutes. But I really welcome you to reach out to me at any time. If you have a student who's an English learner in your classroom and you want to thought partner, you want to think about ways that you could help meet their needs, I'm very, very happy to have a conversation with any of you individually. So please just email or pick up the phone. And if you'd like to do some independent learning, then there are some great resources out there. If you're familiar with WIDA, it's the organization that makes the annual test of English that we call Access. And they offer some really nice self-paced e-workshops that all Maine educators have free access to. So if you'd like to be able to do some of those, just shoot me an email and I'll set you up with an account so that you can log into those free classes. There's also a really exciting project just kicking off now called the Excel Leadership Academy. And this is delivered through UCLA. And basically it's a series, it's a system of micro-credentialing for content area teachers. So you can get free coursework that will lead to a micro-credential, and you'll actually be stipended for your participation in that. So each micro-credential that you complete, you get a $250 stipend. And it's on these kind of most fundamental, really impactful ESOL related topics. So if you want more info about that, do feel free to reach out. And then finally, coming up now in just 2 months, the Maine ESOL meeting is an opportunity not just for ESOL teachers, but for all teachers to come together and focus on our students who are English learners, share professional learning and ideas and insights with each other, and just network with each other. So you're most welcome to attend that, and more information about it is forthcoming through the Maine DOE newsroom. So that's where I'll close, but if you, like I said, if you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to me. And then the last part of our session today, we developed a few scenarios for us to consider. We had thought of breaking you into small groups to look at the scenarios, but Gina and I kind of had a quick side conversation at the beginning of today's session because we're a relatively small group. So we thought that it might be best for us to talk about the scenarios as a whole group and then reflect on them together. So the first one I think was going to be presented by Amelia. Do you have that handy, Amelia? Do you want me to put it in the chat as it's written on our document?
Sure. I mean, I honestly, I think for the time, I think we should skip ahead to yours and DECA's just because they're more specific to DEI in general.
Okay, and then if we end up having more time or if folks want to stay on, we could go back to it. Does that
Yeah.
sound good for everybody? Okay, sounds great. Then Decca, would you like me to copy and paste?
Yes, yes, please.
Absolutely.
I have, let's see,
So do you may read it?
I think
Or
I have,
everybody can see it, right?
okay, I wrote, okay, did you, Mohammed's parents never write in the journal? Oh, okay, yeah. It's in the chat, so hopefully people can read it. Family engagement and culture. It's covering aspects of healthy relationships.
Yeah, maybe Decca, if you don't mind, or I can read it out loud if you like. Sometimes.
Yeah, I can. I can, that's fine. So Ms. Walter sends a communication log each week to the family in her classroom. And the reason that I put it in here was the family engagement piece. So that is the reason. Families write notes and she responds with tips and ideas for them regarding their child. However, Mohammed's parents never write in the journal. Miss Walter is frustrated and does not know more and doesn't know more what more she can do to reach to his parents. What do you think is the problem here? What are the reasons that Miss Walter is not getting the response that she needed or the communication that she needed when it comes to Mohammed's education in the classroom? That makes sense? Awesome.
So do you want somebody to speak, or do you want us to type it in the chat?
Oh, it's whatever Jean thinks.
Yeah, no, you can just speak. That's fine. It'll save time.
My guess would be that either they can't read the communication or they are not able to write back to the teacher themselves. So maybe a phone call home to ask what's going on might work best.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Kim. And I know that many districts do not have the phone connections when it comes to reaching out to parents of ELL students or families who do not speak English. So sometimes it is hard. And then again, earlier when we were talking about it, how many people know about McKinney-Vento, there was some of you guys who do not know what McKinney-Vento or who is the liaison person. So how do we have that community connection that we really, really need to have when it comes to community connection, community building, relationship building for resources? If we have that in our tool belt, then we can say, oh, okay, maybe this teacher is not able to, maybe this parent does not speak English, therefore, let me find a community member who can help us out on that. So that's a good way of answering that, Kim, thanks. Other scenarios, maybe? Or reasons, I should say.
Well, before we move on from this one, Decca, one thought that occurred to me also is that, does Mohammed know that he's supposed to share it with his parents? Has that been understood by him? Is it clear? Because maybe his language isn't to the point yet where he's fully understanding everything that's going on in class. Always possible.
Good point. That is a good point. I didn't mean to move to the next scenario, but I meant like, what other ideas do you think is making this scenario harder for the teacher to reach out to the parents? So that's good. What's wrong with the kid? You know, is there a reason that he doesn't share the information with the parent? Does the parent talk to him at home, say that, hey, how was his school, right? So many things, so many reasons. Any other reason?
I have a thought. So, can you hear me first off?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. So sometimes parents work like a third shift. So let's say hypothetically the parent works from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., right? And so when the kid gets home, the parents are not there potentially. And so he may not ever share it with them or forget, teenagers sometimes forget that kind of stuff. So it's possible they could be working, or their hours, or the shifts and the hours. Just one thought.
Oh, I did not even thought about that. That is so important. So go ahead, Amelia.
That's it. Yeah, that also, I wasn't going in that direction either, but now that you say that one, Margaret, I think about some of our migrant students whose parents are working in the fields during the day, and the kids just don't want to bother them with anything else at night. They've worked so hard, they've worked such long hours. To ask your parents to do this extra thing wouldn't be something a lot of kids want to do. But my thought in terms of all of these potentials is really just how can we build the relationship with the parents? Can we do a home visit? That often will help so much. Can we bring an interpreter or someone from the community to support that communication? Or could the parents know that they could write in this log in their own language if they wanted, or, just all these different ideas going around.
Yeah, so important.
I put yours in, Amelia, underneath. I just put it in the language class is made up of. It's in the chat.
It didn't show up in the chat, Jean. I wonder if you might have yours set to a specific person rather than everyone.
Oh, geez, yes.
That's okay.
To you. Sorry about that.
Okay. I can grab it. Actually, I've got it keyed up too. I thought I had it keyed up. Just one second.
I got it now, so I think, well, hopefully, yeah. I don't know. Okay, everyone. Well. I don't know. Do you see it yet?
Yes.
Yep, it's there.
Okay, good.
So this one is related to language equity, so I'll be happy to read it out loud and reflect on it with you. So the class is made up of mostly English speakers and 2 students who speak both French and English. These 2 students always choose to sit together. During a partner activity, the teacher overhears them speaking French to each other and wonders if they're on task. Other students are complaining that these 2 students are secretly making fun of them. How would you respond in that scenario?
Talk to the students.
What would you say to them, Jen?
So what are you 2 talking about? I mean, I think I'd know them well enough to know their facial expressions if they were in my class, and I could tell if they were misbehaving or on task.
Yeah, having that relationship definitely is so helpful. And just outright asking them, yeah, so can you tell me what your conversation is about? Let me hear what you're thinking about this topic or whatever it may be. Yeah.
And if I had those 2 kids in my class, I'd be learning a lot more French.
Well, that's even better. Yeah, what an opportunity that is, right? Absolutely. Other thoughts?
You could give them an opportunity to actually share whatever it is they're learning in their language. Like if they were working on some kind of presentation, maybe the picture and the writing could be in English, but they could speak it in French, and just for other students to have that opportunity to hear.
Yeah, that could be very cool, Kathy. One note that I'll make about that is, though, of course, you know your students best and you know what they're going to feel comfortable with. Sometimes students might feel uncomfortable if they're kind of showcased as an ambassador of their culture or language, or they're kind of put on the spot to stand out as an example. But that's certainly not true for every student. And there are some students who would just really relish the opportunity to share that with others and to show that, yes, I'm multilingual and this is what I can do. So yeah, that's a nice idea. Other thoughts? What about that last sentence? How would you speak to the other students who are thinking, you know what, those kids are speaking in French. I think they're talking about me. They're making fun of me. They're saying something bad about me. How would you respond to that?
I would once again talk to them. What makes you feel that way?
Mhm.
What's giving you that feeling? Yeah. And I think the fact that the children also speak English and French, you know, that you can have the conversation with them of, you know, maybe these students are feeling this way. Can you have a conversation with them in their language? Because they only speak English. So help them out a little bit and, you know, that's how you know, just have the kids talk to each other about it.
Nice. Brian?
Be an easy fix for me. My school nurse is from Port Ken and she's bilingual, so I could just have her come in and say I needed her.
Eavesdrop.
Yeah, well, yeah, I could say can you take a look at this kid and have a eavesdrop, you know, saying there's an injury or something. And then I'd be able to identify that at that point, you know. Kind of sneaky.
Yeah, that is very creative approach. So this scenario is really based on so many anecdotes, true stories that have come my way, and I know Amelia and Decca have probably heard this.
I have so many experience in that, and especially going back to what Jen said. You know, the kids do speak English and French both, but we are more comfortable on that first language, right? So I remember one day we were in Main Med. I was waiting at the doctor's appointment with a good friend of mine, and we both speak English, but we also first, you know, Somali speakers, so we were speaking Somali, and this guy just get irritated by that. I mean, we're not talking about him. We just, he's like, you speak English. You're supposed to be speaking English. You're here in the United States. I'm like, I just ignore him. We did not say anything to him. But this white lady who was so brave, so strong, she's like, they don't have to speak no English. They can speak whatever they want, and you need to shut up. It was amazing. It was amazing. I mean, what can you say after that? You cannot say nothing to that guy. So I mean, it happens all the time, but it's really good to have somebody who is really understands that. And she, again, Jen, what you said about the body language, right? She understood our body language. We were not talking about anybody, but, you know, deep conversation about something else, because body language is like 80%. Is that correct? Then 20% is spoken or something like that. So she understood that, and she told him, shut up, leave them alone.
I think there's a Seinfeld episode with Elaine in a nail salon that where the nail salon people are talking, and she's convinced they're talking about her.
And they're probably talking about like their sandwich that they're going to have for lunch or something totally benign. But I think people tend to be a little, well, let's just say it outright. So people tend to be a little self-centered. And so when they hear something that's not familiar to them, immediately it goes to something negative. But that's just 99% of the time not the case. And what unfortunately happens because of that impulse to be self-centered and to want to avoid anyone getting the sense that they're being talked about. Sometimes teachers have rules against using another language in the classroom. And especially with these two students who do speak English as well, there's maybe a temptation there to say, well, we all speak English, let's make that the language of the classroom. But that's just really a misguided approach, because that French language that they both share can really facilitate their learning. They can support each other so much with that. And they have a right to speak French. There's nothing that, there's no instructional argument from my point of view to say that they shouldn't be using French. And also I was a study abroad student in Austria many, many years ago. And I was with a big group of other American students, and we were all learning German. Do you think I ever spoke German to them? No, that just feels so unnatural to speak a second language with someone who you know shares your first language. It's just a really unreasonable ask of students, I think.
I wonder if it's an opportunity to like build empathy with other students, or kind of, well, could they be talking about something else besides you? Because I think developmentally, depending on the age group, we can be at certain ages very much like everyone's looking at me, like everyone's talking about me, like everyone's making fun of me. So I think that's very like typical behavior, but maybe to offer being like, well, maybe could they be talking about something else? And, and
Really.
why would someone want to talk their, first language to someone else who speaks the same language?
Right. I like that. Thank you so much. Yep. We do have one more scenario. Jean, should we go ahead with it? Or I know we're at time. We're just a little bit past our planned time, maybe.
I think we'll wrap up because Susan had also indicated she wanted folks who are on the, on the session here just to write down some of your ideas from this session and then who are you going to share them with? So hopefully you'll leave this session and, take some ideas, thoughts, and then figure out, who you'll share them with. We will have some more work sessions on this topic. And in terms of how, to apply best practice in daily routines and curriculum instructions. Now I'll send out, you'll get an evaluation and when you do this evaluation, you'll get a certificate as well. But I want to thank all our presenters. You were awesome. And I'm sorry, I was just trying to, I know we had so much material, but really, really appreciate everybody. April, Decca, Amanda, and Margaret. It was just awesome. You did just a spectacular job. I mean, any one of you could have taken the whole time. So, like I said, hopefully you didn't feel too rushed. But anyway, any questions? Thoughts, anything? All right. All right, well, I'll stop the recording. Let's see. There we go.